Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping into a whole stack of recent stuff from Southern California today, trying to cut through the noise, figure out what's really going on. Think of it as your shortcut to understanding the currents beneath the surface. We're going to cover quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
High stakes politics, ongoing fights for social justice, community celebrations, and some really critical talks about, our future. And we'll see how these may be seemingly separate stories are often really connected. It's kind of fascinating when you see the threads.
Exactly. And this week's material, it really offers this rich tapestry, right? You've got these long-standing challenges, but also some incredibly proactive efforts from communities, from leaders. What we'll explore, I think, is how these local stories actually reflect much bigger national conversations. Representation, equity, accountability, stuff that matters directly to you.
Okay, so our sources lay out a pretty complex picture this week. Let's just dive right in. We have to start with this big political thing, Proposition 50. It's heading to a special election November 4th, and you hear mid-cycle redistricting vote. And the first question is just, what is this really about? Beyond the headlines, I mean.
Yeah, good question to start with because the implications are, they're significant. So Prop 50, the official name is the Election Rigging Response Act. It's actually a package, ACA 8, AB 604, SB 280. The goal, let Californians vote on adopting a temporary congressional map, one that's seen as more favorable to Democrats.
Okay, temporary, but for how long?
That's key. It's not just for the next election. It would apply specifically to 2026, 2028, and 2030. So it effectively overrides the current maps, the ones drawn by the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission.
Right, okay. That really adds context. And the stated reason from California Democrats, they're saying this is a direct counter to partisan redistricting they see happening elsewhere.
Exactly. They're pointing fingers at Republican-controlled states like Texas, Ohio, Indiana, Missouri, saying those efforts were pushed by former President Trump. So California's move is framed as a necessary response.
It feels kind of unprecedented doing this mid-cycle like this.
Well, yes and no. Redistricting usually happens every 10 years, right, after the census. But states can redraw maps mid-cycle. The Supreme Court has actually said partisan redistricting is okay, legally speaking.
As long as race isn't the main factor.
Precisely. So California's move, while unusual timing-wise, is a direct strategic play in this national battle over map drawing. What's really insightful here, I think, isn't just the countermove itself. It's this subtle shift. Like states are becoming their own actors in a way, using state power for these national electoral defense strategies almost.
It's a really interesting frame, and the voices pushing for this in California are pretty strong. Senator Akilah Weber Pearson, she chairs the Legislative Black Caucus.
Right, the CLBC, Democrat from San Diego.
She said, California's response is not one I take lightly, emphasizing it's about defending our right to fair representation. And she linked it to national policies, tariffs, healthcare, education cuts, saying they disproportionately harm Black communities.
Absolutely. And Assemblymember Rhodesia Ransom, also CLBC, Democrat from Stockton, she had a really powerful line during the debate.
What was that?
Something like, this is about citizens who are terrorized. California is not going to sit down and be a bystander. And the CLBC put out a letter saying, look, this is not simply about politics. It is about justice, fairness, making sure Black voices aren't erased. It frames it as a deeply moral issue for them.
But it's important, like you said, to get the nuances. Our sources show Republicans fought this. They argued the current maps were drawn by that public, nonpartisan commission.
That's their main point, yeah. Stick with the independent process.
But interestingly, even the Assembly Minority Leader, James Gallagher, a Republican, he actually criticized Trump's involvement. He said, I have no problem saying that I think my president is wrong on this point.
Yeah, that shows the complexity, doesn't it? Party lines aren't always rigid on these things.
So looking bigger picture, Governor Newsom signed it. He called it a response to an assault on our democracy in Texas.
Right, emphasizing that interstate battle. And former President Obama endorsed it too, calling it measured because ultimately voters decide.
Voters get the final say.
Exactly. And Secretary of State Shirley Weber's role is crucial here. She's ensuring voters get the official voter information guide with arguments for and against Prop 50, so people can make informed choices.
So what this boils down to for you, the listener, is you get a direct vote on this electoral map, a map that could genuinely shift the balance of power in D.C. It really shows how this fight for democracy is playing out state by state now, doesn't it? States using their own strategies against these national forces.
It really does. It's a fascinating dynamic.
Okay, so while that legislative battle is about, strategic power, our sources also dig into something maybe more immediate for folks. this struggle with rising energy costs. It's this pervasive, often kind of invisible burden, isn't it? And deeply tied to these historical inequities that are still shaping things today.
It's a really compelling finding this week, actually. There's a new national study. Binghamton University and Cal State San Bernardino were involved. It found Black households spend, on average, 5.1% of their income on energy. Compare that to the average U.S. household at 3.2%. And that's even when you control for income level.
Wow. So it's not just about being lower income.
Exactly. George Homsey, one of the authors, said it clearly. It's not just because they tend to be poor. There is something that's putting them at a disadvantage. And he thinks it's about where they live.
Okay, so what are those disadvantages then, if it's about location and legacy?
Well, the research points to a few key things. The aging condition of the housing itself, lower homeownership rates play a part, and critically, the legacy of formerly redlined neighborhoods.
Redlining. Can you just briefly explain that?
Sure. It was this discriminatory practice decades ago where banks and government agencies literally drew red lines on maps around certain neighborhoods, usually minority areas, deeming them too risky for mortgages. That led to massive underinvestment, older housing stock, less upkeep. And those older homes, they're just less energy efficient. Plus, higher rental rates often mean people can't make upgrades like better insulation.
So the legacy of redlining is literally showing up in people's energy bills today.
Precisely. That's the profound insight, I think. This invisible history, this systemic racism, directly impacts household budgets and health now, decades later. The past isn't just past, it's a living cost.
That's sobering. And the study talks about an unmanageable energy burden, like 10% or more of income. What does that actually mean for families?
It means impossible choices, often. Paying the energy bill versus buying groceries or necessary medicine, it's not just a number. And this leads to serious health risks, asthma, depression, poor sleep, which, again, disproportionately hit African-American communities. There was a stark example in the sources from D.C., Pepco rate hikes, a Washington gas project potentially adding tens of thousands to bills over decades. It just shows a harsh reality.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Homes built decades ago, still dictating family budgets and health today. How deep do these inequities really run?
That's the question. And it connects, doesn't it? These threads of inequity weave into other areas, like health, specifically clinical trials.
Right. The sources highlighted this big underrepresentation issue. African Americans in clinical trials, I think it was 8% of participants in a 2020 FDA report, compared to 75% white. Why is that such a problem?
It's profoundly important. George Clayton, a pharmaceutical expert, put it well. If African Americans make up a significant percentage of people with hypertension, diabetes, or heart disease, then studies must reflect that. Otherwise, the safety, the effectiveness of new medicines for these groups, it's basically unknown. It's not just stats. It's about whether the medicine actually works equitably.
That's a huge gap. There was a story about Dr. Jeffrey Wayne.
Yeah, the internal medicine specialist in Sacramento. His own heart attack diagnosis got him interested in trials.
And he talked about the benefits for individuals, right? Access to new treatments, better medical care, feeling like you're contributing.
Absolutely. It shows the human side, the potential benefits when these trials are inclusive.
But there are big barriers still. What did Rhonda Smith from the California Black Health Network identify?
She pointed to three main areas. One is individual mistrust, historical stuff, like the Tuskegee syphilis study, Henrietta Lacks, that history lingers.
Understandably so.
Right. Then there's community-level stuff. Trials often aren't located conveniently where Black people live. Access is an issue. And finally, systemic barriers. Sometimes providers just don't offer trials as an option to patients of color. Maybe implicit bias, maybe a lack of awareness.
But California is trying to address this with a Bill of Rights.
Yes, California has a unique clinical trial Bill of Rights. It aims to build trust, protect participants, ensure clear info, ethical standards. It's a proactive step.
Okay, another tough topic surfaced this week, too. The repatriation of Native American remains and artifacts. Assemblymember James Ramos was pretty critical of the University of California on this.
Yeah, very critical. He's pointing out that UC has failed to return thousands of remains and cultural items, even though laws, federal NAGPRA, state laws have been around for decades mandating their return.
Decades? Why is it taking so long?
Well, the audit findings mentioned in the sources, they're pretty damning. They show UC campuses missing deadlines, poor oversight, messy records, and even mismanaging funds meant to help tribes with repatriation.
Mismanaging the funds, wow.
Yeah, specifically, UC Berkeley, UC Santa Barbara, and UC San Diego were called out for just not not spending the net GPRA funds they had year after year.
So what happens now?
Lawmakers, including Ramos, are talking about much stricter oversight, maybe even tying UC state funding to compliance. They're saying laws aren't enough without real accountability, even for prestigious institutions.
It really drives home that point again, doesn't it? The past isn't just history. It demands justice, dignity, action now. How do we make sure these historical debts finally get paid?
It's a fundamental question. These aren't just statistics. They're about people, history, fairness.
Okay, but let's shift gears a bit. It wasn't all about challenges. There was also celebration and forward-looking stuff. Compton Fest 25 sounded pretty amazing.
Yeah, the sources painted a great picture. Compton Fest, put on by Divine Media Group, held at Charles R. Drew University, described as a phenomenal celebration of culture, community, and global impact. They had these 4 pillars for 2025: health equity, disaster preparedness, youth empowerment, and senior care. So really focused.
And lots going on. Music, workshops.
Definitely. Live music divas of Compton, Eric Billinger, but also workshops, panels like Healthy Him, about the business, Healthy Her, really trying to engage and uplift the community.
And the community was involved, awards and things.
Yeah, Mayor Emma Sharif presented Community Impact Awards to local groups, individuals, businesses like the Compton Wellness Collective, Project Blue. Lots of local leaders were there.
You know, the takeaway there feels really powerful. It's not just a party. It's like a community-led response to some of those systemic issues we were just talking about. Local power addressing local needs.
Exactly. It shows that community resilience and empowerment happening from the ground up.
Okay, so from community celebration to another critical investment, our kids' education. But there are some worrying numbers here about student absenteeism.
Yeah, alarming is the right word. The stats from California for 2023-24. 20.4% of students chronically absent. That's 1.2 million kids, way above pre-pandemic levels.
1.2 million.
Oh my gosh.
What are the impacts when so many kids miss so much school?
It's a double whammy, really. Academically, kids who are chronically absent, especially early on, they struggle to learn to read by 3rd grade. That's huge. Sets them back for years.
That's foundational.
Absolutely. And then financially, California schools lose money. Funding is based on attendance, not just enrollment. So they estimate about $3.6 billion lost annually because of absences.
So it hurts the kids' learning and takes resources away from the schools trying to help them?
Exactly. It's this vicious cycle. Less learning, less money to support learning.
Is anything being done?
Yes, thankfully. State Superintendent Tony Thurmond and education officials, they're pledging to cut chronic absenteeism by 50% in the next 5 years.
50%? That's ambitious. How?
They've put out new statewide guidance. It focuses on early intervention, really engaging families, and this is important, making sure students feel safe on campus.
Yeah.
Especially with heightened immigration enforcement fears.
Ah, okay, so that ties into legislative efforts too.
Right. There are bills being considered SB 98 to alert families if immigration officers are around, AB 49 to limit campus access without a warrant. Thurmond basically said, look, when we lose kids because they're scared to come to school, we lose money, sure. But more importantly, students lose learning opportunities. It's about access.
Makes sense. A really multifaceted problem needs that kind of response. Okay, finally, let's circle back to the broader political and legal stage. Another high-stakes situation, this time about the rule of law itself.
Right. California's Attorney General Rob Bonta, he's joined forces with 20 other state AGs. They're standing up for New York AG Letitia James. They're accusing the U.S. Department of Justice of running a politically motivated campaign to intimidate her. Why? Because she pursued those financial fraud claims against former President Trump and his business.
Politically motivated intimidation. That's a serious charge. What exactly are they saying the DOJ did? The sources mention specifics.
They did. The AG's letter points to actions by Edward R. Martin, Jr., who heads the DOJ's Weaponization Working Group. Kind of an ironic name, maybe? Yeah, a bit. They mention his public statement about wanting to stick the landing on an investigation into James, showing up unannounced at her home for press photos, and sending a letter to her personal lawyer suggesting she resign as an act of good faith.
Wow. Suggesting she resign.
Yeah. The coalition of AGs sees these actions as crossing a line, basically going beyond legitimate inquiry into political interference.
And this coalition is broad, not just California and New York.
No, it includes AGs from places like Arizona, Michigan, North Carolina, Oregon, Washington. A pretty wide group.
And their main message is?
Their core point is that this kind of investigation undermines the independence and authority of state attorneys general nationwide. They want the probe stopped and a reaffirmation of impartiality from federal law enforcement.
It really raises a fundamental question, doesn't it, about checks and balances. What happens if state AGs feel pressured when they try to prosecute powerful figures?
That's the critical point, I think.
Yeah.
It potentially erodes the ability of states to enforce their own laws independently. It challenges federalism, the very structure of legal accountability. It's not just politics, it's about the system itself.
Wow. What a week, right? We've really covered a lot in this deep dive, from those like almost geopolitical chess moves with Prop 50
Yeah, the electoral fairness fight,
to the deep, persistent challenges of energy costs and healthcare gaps tied to history.
the need for repatriation, for dignity,
And then the vibrant energy of Compton Fest building community.
and the critical work on kids' education and protecting legal independence. It's a lot.
It really is.
And it just reinforces how interconnected everything is, doesn't it?
Mm.
These aren't separate stories. Political battles, local action, historical legacies, they all weave together on justice, representation, how we use knowledge, and how the past is still shaping today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you, our listener, reflect on all this, maybe think about these critical moments. A vote on redistricting that could tilt national power, how we face up to historical wrongs in housing or healthcare, how we protect our legal systems. How do these big things actually shape daily life and future chances in our own communities? And how do you weigh in on issues that need both, immediate action and that long-term commitment? Recognizing that what we decide today echoes for decades. Lots to think